There's a lighthouse on the edge of a small harbor I used to visit. It stood alone against the wind, tall, stoic, silent. Its beam sweeping across the black water every few seconds like a heartbeat that never stopped. The man who tended it was an older fellow named James. Quiet eyes, weathered hands, and the kind of calm that only comes from years of listening to the sea. One evening, as the waves hit the rocks below us, James told me something I've never forgotten. He said, "For years, I tried to make my light the brightest on the coast. I wanted ships to see mine before any other, but I was so busy polishing my lamp that I didn't notice how dim I'd become." I must have looked puzzled, because he smiled, the kind of smile that comes from pain already lived through, and said, "One night, I realized something. I don't need to make other lights smaller. I just need to keep mine shining." That night, under a silver sky, I understood what he meant. You can't live your life trying to dim someone else's glow. You can only strengthen your own. Envy is a quiet thing. It doesn't announce itself. It creeps in softly, a flicker in the dark. Maybe it's when you see someone else succeed, a friend's promotion, a stranger's perfect house, a colleague's applause. You smile, you say, "Good for them." But somewhere inside, something twists. You whisper to yourself, "What about me?" Most of us try to silence that feeling because envy feels ugly, like it says something bad about who we are. But here's the truth I've learned. Envy isn't evil, it's information. It's a compass pointing toward something you value but haven't yet claimed. I remember feeling that same sting once. A friend of mine published a book that took off like a sail in strong wind. I congratulated him, meant every word. And still, as I walked home, there was an ache I couldn't name. I told myself I was happy for him, and I was. But beneath that lived a quiet whisper, "Why not me?" For days I carried it like a secret, until one morning, sitting by the window, I realized something simple and sharp. The pain I felt wasn't about his success. It was about my silence. I wasn't writing. I was comparing. And the truth hit me. I wasn't jealous of his book. I was jealous of his courage to finish one. That's when envy changed shape for me. It stopped looking like a shadow and started looking like a mirror, reflecting what I wanted to grow. When envy whispers, "I wish that were me," you can close your heart and shrink, or you can open it and learn. Comparison itself isn't the enemy, it's neutral, like fire. Used recklessly, it burns. Used wisely, it lights your path. So the real question isn't, how do I stop comparing? It's, what is this feeling showing me about myself? Because every pang of envy hides a message. This matters to you. Confidence, creativity, consistency, freedom. Name it, and envy loses its poison and becomes a pointer. A young man named Aaron once told me he couldn't open social media anymore. "Every time I do," he said, "I feel smaller." He'd scrolled past travel photos, promotions, applause, and by the end, he felt like a ghost in his own life. So I asked, "Whose life are you living while you scroll?" He didn't answer, not at first. We talked about the lighthouse, about how the keeper stopped trying to outshine others and simply kept his own light steady. A week later, Aaron messaged me. "I stopped scrolling in the mornings. Now I write for 15 minutes instead." Then he added, "It's strange. The less I compare, the more ideas I have." That's no accident. When you turn envy into energy, you reclaim every watt of power you used to spend on judgment. But envy has a clever disguise. It wears the mask of judgment. We say, they just got lucky, or it's easier for them. We think we're protecting our pride, but we're really protecting our fear. The fear that maybe we're capable of more than we've allowed ourselves to become. Once you see that, envy loosens its grip. There was a time I envied speakers who seemed effortless on stage, confident, magnetic. Meanwhile, I was behind the curtain, trembling, rehearsing every line. One night, watching a man deliver a flawless talk, I tried a different question. What did it take for him to be that good? And suddenly I didn't see a star. I saw years of practice, shaky starts, sleepless edits. I saw the work. Envy turned into respect. Respect turned into motivation. That's the secret. Look at success through the lens of empathy, and comparison transforms. You stop saying, "Why them?" and start asking, "What can I learn?" That small pivot is where growth begins. You're right to think it isn't easy. It isn't. It's daily work. The lighthouse didn't stay strong because it burned perfectly. It stayed strong because the keeper cleaned the lens every day. That's our work too, to keep clearing the way we see others until their light stops blinding us and starts guiding us. I've watched envy fracture friendships, stall teams, strain families, not because people were bad, but because they confused comparison with competition. They forgot someone else's success isn't your failure. Read envy the right way, and it becomes one of the finest teachers you'll ever have. A painter named Melissa told me, "I can't visit galleries anymore. Every painting makes me feel like a fraud." I asked what she saw when she looked. "Perfection," she said. "Look again," I told her. "Not at the finish, at the brush strokes. Each one is a mistake corrected by another." A month later she called, laughing. "I hung my own work in my studio for the first time. It's not perfect, but it's mine." That's what happens when you stop measuring and start making. Action turns comparison into clarity. Move even a little, and you remember you're not behind, you're becoming. Soon, I'll show you 5 simple steps to turn comparison into energy and envy into joy. But first, hold one image. Picture the lighthouse again, steady, strong, shining not to compete, but to guide. Every time envy strikes, think of that. You don't need to dim another person's light to see your path more clearly. You only need to turn up your own. You know, when people talk about envy, they talk about suppressing it, pushing it down, pretending it isn't there. But you can't outsmart envy by burying it. You outgrow it by understanding it. Envy isn't a flaw, it's feedback. Listen with kindness, and it becomes power. 5 small steps, 5 daily practices to turn comparison into movement and jealousy into joy. Step 1. The anatomy of envy. When envy strikes, most people either shrink, "I'll never have that," or strike, "They don't deserve it." Both roads go nowhere. Next time you feel that sharp little tug, pause. Don't judge it. Study it. Ask, what exactly am I envious of? Not the surface, the substance. Maybe you envy someone's wealth. Underneath, you crave freedom. Maybe you envy their audience. Underneath, you want impact. Maybe you envy confidence. Underneath, you want courage. Name the skill or value behind the feeling, and envy becomes a pointer. A young man told me, "I hate how jealous I get when someone buys a new car." "What do those cars mean to you?" I asked. He thought. "Freedom. They can go anywhere." "Then maybe you don't want the car," I said. "Maybe you want movement." He started saving, not for leather seats, but for a short trip he'd postponed for years. He returned lighter, brighter, free in the way he'd wanted all along. Translate envy into desire, and it stops being about what others have. It becomes about what's waiting to be born in you. Step 2. Honest recognition of effort. Once you know what envy is pointing to, look again. Not at the result, but at the road. We see highlight reels and forget the hours of repetition, doubt, and discipline. Train your eyes to see the work. Instead of, "They're lucky," try, "They earned that, and maybe I can too." At a dinner once, a young founder was being celebrated for selling his company. Later, I found him outside, alone, exhausted. "Everyone wants my success," he said. "Nobody wants my calendar." That line stayed with me. Behind every bright moment is a long shadow of effort. So I ask myself, when envy stirs, do I want the outcome or the discipline that created it? Step 3. The gratitude letter to a distant mentor. We all have silent teachers, authors, musicians, leaders, people we've never met whose light guided us anyway. Sometimes envy flares when they shine, not because we dislike them, but because they remind us who we want to become. Write them a letter. You don't have to send it. Thank them for the standard they set. Name what you've learned. A woman, jealous of a colleague who spoke at conferences, wrote a gratitude note as an experiment. Halfway through, the jealousy dissolved. What remained was respect and permission. Gratitude is light. It cannot share space with envy for long. Step 4. 1 millimeter a day. I used to think growth meant leaps, but real transformation happens a millimeter at a time. You can't outthink envy. You can only outwork it. Instead of watching others climb, take one small step of your own. Even the tiniest consistent motion builds trust with yourself. Lila always compared herself to a friend, a fitness coach with perfect discipline. "I'll start when I have her motivation," she said. "Start with 1 block," I told her. "Walk around the corner. That's it." She laughed, then did it. Next day, 2 blocks, then 3. A year later, she ran her first half marathon. "I stopped comparing," she said, "when I realized we were running different races." That's the power of 1 millimeter a day. It looks small until you see how far it's carried you. Tonight, write down one area where envy has been whispering. Then ask, what's 1 millimeter I can move in that direction tomorrow? You don't need fireworks. You need friction. The gentle kind that keeps you going. Momentum, no matter how small, quiets comparison faster than perfection ever will. Step 5. The ritual of returning light. Transformation isn't only about thinking differently. It's about reminding yourself who you are. When envy creeps back in, and it will, you need a ritual. Something simple and symbolic that brings you home to your own light. For me, it's a candle. I light one every evening before I write. It's my quiet promise to keep the fire burning even when someone else's flame looks brighter. A friend keeps a jar labeled "My Own Progress." Each week, she drops in a note, one small thing she's proud of. Not compared to anyone else, just compared to who she was. When envy whispers, she opens the jar and reads. By the end, she remembers. Her story is unfolding just fine, one spark at a time. That's the ritual of returning light. Not grand, grounding. Your worth doesn't depend on how brightly others shine. Let me leave you with what the lighthouse keeper told me at sunrise, as the ocean turned gold and the gulls wrote their names in the wind. Do you see how every light along the coast has a different rhythm? One blinks every 4 seconds, one every 7, one every 10. If they all flashed at once, sailors wouldn't know which way was home. Each light has its purpose. Each light keeps someone safe. That's how I see it now. Life isn't a contest of brightness. It's a constellation of timing. Your moment comes not when you shine like someone else, but when you shine in your own rhythm. So the next time envy visits, welcome it. Ask what it's trying to teach you. Thank it for pointing toward what matters. Then turn that signal into action, even if it's just 1 millimeter today. And every evening remind yourself, you're not behind, you're becoming. Before we end, go back, just for a moment, to that lighthouse. Night air, dark sea, a horizon full of possibility. Far off, another light, bright, steady. For a second you feel small. Then you remember, you don't need to dim that light. You just need to tend to yours. You adjust the lens, clean the glass, trim the flame. And slowly, your beam cuts through the fog, strong, proud, alive. You realize you're not competing, you're contributing. That is the quiet miracle of envy turned to inspiration. It's not about having more light. It's about remembering you have one and keeping it lit. So tonight, think of the people whose light once made you shrink and whisper something new. Thank you for showing me where to grow. Then take one small step toward that growth, because every light along the coast matters, including yours. And when morning comes, let yours shine, not to compete, but to guide, not to prove, but to contribute, not to outshine, but to inspire. Somewhere out there, someone needs your light to find their way home. You know, every time I think of that lighthouse, I realize something deeper about the world we live in today. We've built an ocean of lights. Screens, notifications, numbers, applause. Everyone flashing, everyone shining, everyone wanting to be seen. And yet, somehow, more people feel invisible than ever. Maybe that's because we've mistaken visibility for value. We think the brightest light wins, but brightness fades fast when it burns without purpose. I've met people with thousands of followers who still feel unseen. And I've met quiet souls, almost invisible to the world, who light entire rooms just by showing up with peace in their eyes. See, the keeper never asked, "Am I brighter than the others?" He only asked, "Am I doing what I'm here to do?" That's the question that keeps a person whole, because when you focus on being authentic instead of impressive, your light starts to attract rather than compete, and suddenly, life feels lighter. One afternoon, years after that first meeting, I went back to the coast. The lighthouse was still standing, steady, familiar, a little older, just like me. James was sitting on a bench facing the sea, a thermos beside him, his cap pulled low. He looked at me and smiled. "Still trying to outshine the world?" he asked, half teasing. I laughed. "Maybe just learning how to stay lit." He nodded slowly. "That's all there is to it, Dale. Keep the flame steady. The ocean will do the rest." We sat in silence after that, the kind of silence that feels like prayer. And I realized something I'd missed for years. Peace doesn't come from having the biggest light. It comes from trusting that your light is enough. When you stop competing for brightness, you start connecting through presence. That's when you notice the stars, how they shine together, not against each other. We were never meant to blind each other with brilliance. We were meant to guide one another home. I sometimes wonder what the world would feel like if we all stopped trying to be brighter and simply tried to be steady. If we stopped asking who's ahead and started asking who needs light right now. Maybe then we'd realize that life was never about racing toward recognition. It was always about illuminating the path for ourselves, for each other. You don't have to make your story spectacular. You just have to make it sincere. Because truth has its own kind of brightness, soft, enduring, unmistakable. It doesn't shout. It glows. I think about James sometimes, still tending that lighthouse on the edge of the harbor. Some nights the fog rolls in so thick you can barely see 10 feet ahead. And yet, he keeps the lamp lit. He doesn't know which ship will see it, or when, but he trusts that the light will reach someone, somewhere. And maybe that's the way to live. To keep showing up, even when no one's watching. To keep giving, even when no one claps. To keep shining, not for recognition, but for meaning. So tonight, when envy tries to creep back in, when you see someone else's light and feel that familiar sting, pause. Smile softly to yourself and say, "Good. The coast is brighter because of them, and mine still shines too." Because every light matters, every rhythm counts, and the ocean is wide enough for all of us. That, my friend, is what it means to live without comparison, to shine without competing, to grow without grasping, to glow without guilt. It's not about being the brightest. It's about being the truest. And when you do that, when you let your light burn at its honest rhythm, you'll notice something beautiful. The world doesn't dim around you. It begins to harmonize. So keep your flame steady. Keep your glass clean. And if the wind ever blows too hard, remember what James said. You don't have to blind the coast. You just have to keep shining. Because somewhere out there, someone's watching through the dark, searching for a little proof that hope still exists. And when they see your light, they'll know the answer. You know, when I think back on all these stories, the lighthouse, the painter, the runner, the dreamers who learned to begin again, they all share one quiet truth. None of them found peace by being the best. They found it by being real. There's a kind of strength that doesn't come from competition or applause. It comes from alignment, when what you think, what you say, and what you do all move in the same direction. That's what makes a person steady. That's what keeps their light from flickering in every passing wind. So maybe this is your reminder tonight, that you don't have to prove your worth by shining louder than anyone else. You prove it by showing up with sincerity, by giving the world the honest version of your light. Because, my friend, the world doesn't need another perfect glow. It needs real warmth. It needs lights that flicker sometimes, that dim and rise again, that say, "I'm still here," even on the hardest nights. And when you live that way, gently, honestly, with compassion for your own process, something beautiful happens. The comparison fades, the envy softens, and what remains is peace, quiet, grounded peace. That's when you start to notice the beauty of the coast itself, not just the lights, but the space between them, the waves still moving, the horizon still breathing, life still unfolding, imperfect and magnificent. So tonight, as the world hums and the tide pulls away, take a moment to breathe. Let every thought of "not enough" drift out with the water, and whisper to yourself, softly, like a promise, "I'll keep my light steady, and I'll let others shine too." Because we were never meant to blind each other. We were meant to guide each other home. Thank you for listening. Thank you for keeping your light alive. Now rest easy, my friend. The ocean is wide, the night is calm, and your lighthouse is shining just fine.